Hi everyone, today we are going to break down how to ride Toeside. Let's get started. So, what matters most when riding the Toeside? The first key is a stable basic stance with a controlled center of mass. Before talking about Toeside itself, we need to understand basic stance. The reason is simple. Toeside riding is actually very close to your basic stance. Your basic stance changes depending on your binding angles. My setup is a forward stance with 36 degrees on the front foot and 27 degrees on the back foot, so keep that in mind while watching. That said, everything I explain here also applies to other angles, so don't worry. One important thing I want to clarify first. There is not just one basic stance. There are two main types of basic stance. The first one is the angle aligned stance. In this stance, your pelvis follows your front foot angle. Your hips and knees are slightly diagonal, matching the binding angle. The second one is the direction of travel stance. In this stance, your pelvis faces the direction of travel, toward the nose. Your hips stay facing forward rather than following the binding angles. On top of that, there are different height levels for your center of mass. You should think of 4 vertical positions: tall stance, high stance, mid stance, low stance. And it is not only vertical. There is also front and back weight distribution. As a baseline, put about 40% on the front foot and 60% on the back foot. In simple terms, it is slightly back foot dominant. The reason for this is to prevent leaning too far forward. When you ride downhill, snow resistance acts like a subtle brake. To avoid getting pulled forward, that 40-60 balance works very well. Of course, this changes depending on snow conditions. In powder, you might go 30, front 70 back to keep the nose from diving. On a firm, clean groomer, you can ride closer to 50-50 and use your speed more aggressively. So basic stance does not mean one fixed position. You should adjust it based on snow conditions and the type of turn you want to make. Now let's take a closer look at this. We'll start with a stance that follows your binding angles. First, point your front knee in the direction of your front foot angle. Your back knee will naturally follow. Once both knees are aligned, your pelvis orientation is automatically set. From there, simply stand tall. That is your angle-aligned tall stance. The tall stance is essentially a standing upright position, with your joints fully extended. This tall position works well for body axis turns, or when you're tired. From there, bend your knees and hinge at your hips a little. That gives you the high stance. If you bend more, you get the mid stance. Most riders stay somewhere between high and mid stance when they ride. There's nothing wrong with that. However, if you want to touch the snow during carving, you need to hinge at your hips much more, especially on heel side. This is what a low stance really looks like. If you cannot create a low stance in a static position, there's no way you can do it dynamically during a turn. That is why I strongly recommend practicing this at home in front of a mirror. Almost nobody can do this for the first time on snow, much lower than most people think. Even in this low stance, the weight distribution stays around 40 front 60 back. Again, one basic stance cannot handle every situation. Adjust your stance depending on the conditions. Your stance height and pelvis position directly affect where your center of mass sits. So when people talk about having a bad position, I personally think they are really talking about poor center of mass placement. Before we move on, let's quickly look at some common mistakes. Mistake number 1. Your head leans toward the toe side. Your head should always stay above the board. The head is heavy. If it goes toe side, your whole body will tip over. Many riders think their position is fine, but when they watch their own riding clips, they realize their head is clearly outside the board. Record your riding and check it yourself. Mistake number 2. Your knees and pelvis are facing sideways. This often happens to riders who are not used to a forward stance. They end up riding a forward setup with a duck stance posture. That wastes the advantages of a forward stance. With a forward stance, you should either stand along your front foot angle or keep your pelvis facing the direction of travel. This makes it easier to get your board on edge, maintain visibility on heel side, and control edge engagement. Now let's look at the stance with the pelvis facing the direction of travel. Start from a tall stance. Make your shoulder line perpendicular to the board, compared side by side. The angle-aligned stance has a diagonal pelvis. The direction of travel stance has the pelvis facing the direction of travel. Standing tall like this gives you the direction of travel tall stance. This stance is very strong at high speed. It works well when you want to charge or right before committing to a full carving run. From there, bend your knees slightly for a high stance. Bend more for a mid stance. And for a low stance, you drop this much. I like to place my front hand near my calf or around the middle to lower part of the high back. This helps keep my body compact and my center of mass closer to the board center. As you place your front hand on the high back, your pelvis may rotate slightly toward the binding angle. As long as your head stays over the board and the stance feels stable, that is perfectly fine. If you compare a low stance with the pelvis aligned toward the binding angle to a low stance with the pelvis facing the direction of travel, they may look very similar. However, you can see that the pelvis orientation is slightly different. Now we finally get to Toeside basic stance. For Toeside, use the direction of travel stance as your base. Start with your shoulders and pelvis facing forward. From there, lean your entire body toward the direction your back knee naturally moves, rather than forcing the movement. Focus on moving your center of mass as one unit. Do not let your head fall outside the board. Imagine your body as a single straight pole while riding Toeside. This is different from heel side. On heel side, you hinge at your hips, so the head naturally moves outside the board. On Toeside, it should not. A common mistake is leaning toward the front foot angle with too much weight on the front foot. This almost always results in a forward fall. Toeside is more likely to pitch you forward than heel side, so be mindful of this difference. Now that you understand the basic Toeside stance, the next key point is body lean as one unit, with your head over the board. We have already covered this in our heel side video, but this time, we will look at practical drills you can actually do on the slope for Toeside riding. Step 1. Lean from a tall stance. In other words, practice body axis turns. Turning is simple once you can tip your body axis, so let's start with the most simple drill, the body axis turn. Axis turns work best on smooth morning snow. Because you ride in a tall stance, rough afternoon conditions make it hard to absorb impacts with your knees and hips, which often results in falling. Practice this drill on clean, smooth slopes whenever possible. As a quick side note, the movement of bringing your upper body back up is called lean out. Lean out is useful when you want to quickly get your board on edge using your knees and ankles, such as during transitions or short turns. Lean in, on the other hand, means tipping your entire body as one solid unit, like a single straight pole. When you can lean in this much, touching the snow with your hand becomes easy. Now let's watch a rider who joined one of our lessons last season. When you set your body axis, it is important to send your eyes and shoulders into the turn together. The key is finding the balance between inward body lean toward the turn and outward centrifugal force in a body axis turn. Step 2. Lean from a mid stance without changing pelvis orientation or head position. First, take a mid stance. If you look at this, you can see that the body is leaning while keeping the basic stance and a single body axis. Now here's a common mistake. This clip is taken from a video sent through my online analysis service. If you send me your riding video, I will create an analysis video and explain it. If you are interested, please check the description. Example number 1. This rider is trying to put the hand on the snow and ends up falling inward. Do not try to put your hand on the snow. If you tend to fall inward, focus on a 50-50 weight distribution between your front foot and back foot during the transition. In this case, the rider is riding too much on the back foot. As you may have already noticed, the third key point for Toeside riding is to avoid reaching for the snow and maintain balanced front to back weight distribution. Here's another reference clip from a different angle. If you look at this position, you can see that the weight is roughly 50-50 between the front foot and the back foot. During the transition, first think about a 50-50 weight distribution between the front foot and the back foot, then keep a single body axis and use lean out depending on the situation. By depending on the situation, I mean that during transitions or short turns, when the turn radius is small, you do not always have enough time to lean fully with your body axis. In those cases, you may need to get your board on edge from your lower body. As a result of leaning your body axis, your hand may end up touching the snow, but the idea is that your hand touches the snow because of the lean, not because you are trying to touch it. My definition of lean out versus falling inward is this. The starting point is that your center of mass is positioned on the vertical line created by the board's edge angle. From that position, if you raise your head and upper body upward, that is lean out. If your head and upper body fold toward the snow, that becomes falling inward. When your center of mass stays on the vertical line of the edge angle, you can transmit force to the board more effectively. You can push straight through the board like this. I am not trying to deny riding with a falling inward style. However, compared to falling inward, pushing with a straight body axis allows you to apply pressure to the board and use its rebound. Personally, I prefer this approach, and I also think riding with a straight body axis looks better. As you increase your edge angle, the point where your hand touches the snow will change. Eventually, there will be no place to put your hand, and the contact point moves further to the inside. It may even feel like your forearm is brushing the snow. If we rotate this image and make the edge angle horizontal relative to gravity, it becomes very close to the basic stance. That is why I always say, for Toeside, start by practicing from the basic stance. The second common mistake is the front shoulder closing like this. If you look at the lower image, you can see that the front shoulder is actually open. This is important to remember. On toe side, the front shoulder basically does not close. Of course, this is different if you are using upper body rotation, such as in short turns, but for basic toe side riding, the front shoulder does not close. The same applies to the front arm. Your front arm should not move to the toe side beyond your front foot. With proper practice in a lesson, this is how it should look. And here's some good news for those who struggle with a closing front shoulder. On toe side, it is completely fine to use counter rotation. Yes, this is a strong counter rotation. Even just before the turn peak, you can see that the front shoulder is still open. If you prefer a style where you swing the front shoulder as you exit the turn, feel free to do that. That comes down to personal preference. We've gone into a lot of detail so far, but what separates riders who truly master toe side from those who can simply ride it? In the next part, we will look at the front foot, torsion, center of mass, and transitions. However, that content will be covered in a separate video. See you in the next one.